streets, back into our town centres, back into our communities. I give way to the honourable member. I hope he'll apologise for the scale of cuts that his party's government brought in.
And she makes some very important points about neighbourhood policing. So does she therefore agree with me then that local police stations should be integral to this plan?
To state.
Well, local police stations are a matter for local forces, but they can be a central part of neighbourhood policing, which sadly has been heavily cut back in recent years. In fact, in many areas of the country, neighbourhood policing cut by a third or nearly a half. God, Madam Deputy Speaker, I must have missed a bit of the Shadow Home Secretary's response. The bit, maybe at the beginning, when he apologised to the House and to the country for his party's policies that quadrupled net migration in the space of just 4 years. He tells us his concerns about the level of migration. It was his party that is responsible for that huge increase in net migration. And I must have missed the bit as well, where he confessed that from the point at which he became an immigration minister in 2020, when all these policies were introduced, to the point at which the Shadow Justice Secretary finished being immigration minister in 2023, net migration rose from 170,000 a year to 870,000 a year. But I must have missed that confession and that apology, because that is what the Shadow Home Secretary should have done. And frankly, until he admits his failure, until he apologises for the damage and the chaos that he and his party caused, frankly, no one is going to take seriously a single word he says. And he refers to visa changes that were made before the election. I would say we supported changes that were made by the Right Honourable Member for Braintree, but he had to reverse some of the changes that the Shadow Home Secretary made when he was an immigration minister. And as for caps, the White Paper provides for caps on low-skilled migration on the temporary shortage list. But his targets and caps are as meaningless as all the other ones that his party introduced when they were in government. Indeed, let me quote from the time of the Conservative government's reforms that caused a lot of these problems. I especially thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and on international students. I lobbied for both. That was the current leader of the opposition. So the idea that this lot have anything to offer is like people who burgled your house and then turn up the next day and offer to sell you a dog. If they are serious about making the changes, if they are serious about tackling small boats, frankly, they should vote for our counter-terrorism powers to tackle the smuggler gangs that repeatedly he and the other right-wing parties have voted against. That's not serious. This government is. I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, I don't think she can have read this report and the seriousness of its conclusions, because it sets out a timeline of failure from 2009 to 2025. Repeated reports and recommendations that were not acted on child protection, on police investigations, on ethnicity data, on data sharing, on support for victims. For 14 of those 16 years, her party was in government, including years when she was the Minister for Children and Families, then the Minister for Equalities, covering race and ethnicity issues and violence against women and girls. And I didn't hear her raise any of these issues until January of this year.
miscounting numbers. Can I just drill down on the point that my honourable friend made earlier? Of the 13,000 new neighbourhood officers that the Home Secretary claims she is recruiting, can she comment that there will be 3,000 officers that will be diverted from an existing workforce? They're not new, are they? And can she also confirm that the police funding settlement that's been put down by the Home Secretary will actually lead to 1,873 officers being withdrawn?
Do you know, sadly, I just didn't hear that apology for the previous Conservative government's massive cuts to neighbourhood policing, including many towns and cities across their country seeing their neighbourhood police slashed in half right across the country and communities badly let down. But I'm sure the next Conservative member to intervene will begin their question with a huge apology for the damage their party and their government did. I'm really pleased to hear the honourable member ready to give an apology for the deeply damaging legacy of his party in government.
I thank the Home Secretary for giving way. I think she should apologise for not answering the question. There were record levels of policing under the last government with the 20,000 extra police officers that were recruited. But I ask her again. She has said she is recruiting 13,000 new neighbourhood police officers. Can she confirm that 3,000 of those will be rediverted from extra officers? They're not new, are they?
Well, so still no apology for the deep damage that they have done. And let's be clear, they halved the number of PCSOs, halved them. They've cut the number of neighbourhood police officers probably by more than 10,000. But do you know what? We can't even be precise because their measuring of neighbourhood police officers was so ropey and so all over the place, we can't even be certain what the precise cuts were. This government is committed to increasing neighbourhood policing and PCSOs by 13,000. But, you know, I'm glad to see there's some signs on the benches opposite of a change in heart. Members recognising how damaging their approach to town centre crime has been, the Shadow Home Secretary has written on Facebook, and I quote, "The police must have," and he puts this in capital letters, "zero tolerance to shoplifting and phone theft in Croydon, otherwise it will escalate. Stealing even less than £200 is illegal. So the police must focus ruthlessly on catching criminals and pursue every line of inquiry." Well, who'd have thought it? If that's what the right honourable gentleman now believes, why on earth didn't he take the opportunity in the 2 years that he was the policing minister to scrap the £200 threshold, which sent all the wrong signals across the police? Of course, we do know what part of his remedy, of course, to the disappearance of neighbourhood police and the soaring levels of town centre crime. He said, the wider public do have the powers of citizens' arrest. And where it's safe to do so, I would encourage that to be used, including potentially a physical challenge. Otherwise, it will just escalate. So we'll put aside the intriguing suggestion that perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary wanders round with handcuffs in his pocket. I wonder if maybe he just misunderstood the Peel principle that the police are the public and the public are the police. What they meant was neighbourhood police in the community, not leaving the community to pick up arms because the neighbourhood police had gone. And as for reform, looks like they're too busy dealing with their own internal antisocial behaviour to even show up.